There are battles no one sees, but that we fight daily in the silence of our minds. These invisible struggles with thoughts that sabotage us, that sow fear, that distort reality until it becomes an enemy. It's not always the world that attacks us. Sometimes we are the ones who collapse from within. Let me tell you a story that might sound familiar. Imagine waking up on a Monday morning, before the alarm even rings. Your mind is already active, anticipating the day. What will happen if I'm late? What will my boss say if I don't finish that project? Why do I always feel inadequate? Within minutes, without even getting out of bed, your day is already ruined by thoughts that never happened. This is the invisible enemy we all face. It's not a monster under the bed or a villain in a movie. It's something much more subtle and dangerous, the narrative we build inside ourselves without even realizing it. And here's the revealing truth. Your thoughts are not facts. They are interpretations, often distorted, of reality. The Stoics discovered that true freedom begins when we stop reacting and start mastering what we think. While others were dragged away by anger or emotional chaos, they trained calmness like a sacred muscle. It wasn't about not feeling, but about feeling without losing control. Today I want to reveal how you can do the same, how you can stop that mental storm before it erupts. Let me share with you a powerful metaphor that the Stoics used. Imagine your mind as a garden. If you abandon it, weeds will grow on their own and cover everything. But if you decide to plant, water, and care for it, what will flourish is harmony. No one else can do this work for you, because inner freedom cannot be delegated. Before moving forward, I need you to do something important. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, go to the comments and write, "Today I decide to govern my mind before it governs me." With those words, you declare your commitment to inner strength. Write it now and make it real. This is not just a trivial exercise. It's the first tangible step toward the change you're about to undertake. Don't skip any of these lessons, especially the last one, because it will leave you speechless. But before we begin, if you find value in these Vita Stoica videos, I encourage you to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated on the latest news. This series will change your life if you allow it to. Now take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a moment if you need to. When you open them, we'll begin a journey of 12 lessons that will transform your relationship with your own mind. This is not just another motivational video. It's a practical manual for inner freedom, based on principles that have withstood more than 2,000 years of testing. Remember, when you master your mind, everything changes. You are no longer a victim of your impulses, but the architect of your serenity. If you decide to apply these teachings from the Vita Stoica channel, you'll start acting with purpose instead of reacting with emotion. You're about to discover how to become the strongest, calmest, and most powerful version of yourself. Lesson 1. The invisible battle in your mind. Within each person, a battle is fought that no one else can see. A silent struggle that develops deep within the mind. There, thoughts are born that seem small and harmless, but that in reality are seeds with the power to transform an entire life. Let me explain this with a practical example we can all relate to. Imagine you're in a work meeting and someone criticizes your idea. The initial thought might be, "My idea wasn't good." But if you don't question it, this thought can become, "I'm not good at my job. Then I'll never be successful. And finally, I'm a failure." In minutes, a specific comment has become a narrative that defines your identity. Here's the mechanism the Stoics understood perfectly. What we feed with our attention becomes the force that governs us. Every time you pay attention to a thought, you're watering it. Every time you repeat it, you're fertilizing it. And over time, what began as a small seed becomes a tree that blocks your light. Let me share an exercise you can do today to identify these seeds in your own mental garden. For the next 24 hours, each time you notice a negative thought appearing, ask yourself, what need is this thought trying to satisfy? Most negative thoughts attempt to protect you from pain or shame, but they do so in ways that end up harming you more. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic masters, used to say, "It's not external circumstances that disturb us, but the ideas we choose to maintain about them." This revolutionary statement gives us the power to change our experience without needing to change the external world. Let me tell you about a student of mine, Carlos, who applied this principle in a transformative way. He worked at a company where his boss was extremely critical. Every negative comment sank him into doubt. But when he learned to separate the fact, "My boss criticized my report," from his interpretation, "I'm incompetent," everything changed. He began to see criticism as opportunities for improvement, not as personal attacks. In 3 months, not only did his performance improve, but his boss began to trust him with more important projects. The difference between a life dominated by confusion and one guided by serenity lies in which seeds you decide to water. Imagine waking up each day and paying attention only to what takes away your peace. Past mistakes, criticisms you receive, worries that haven't happened yet. By doing this, you give water to those seeds, and little by little they grow until they become a dark forest that surrounds you and from which escape seems impossible. But there's also the option to cultivate thoughts that strengthen you, to direct your gaze toward what depends on you, to nourish your interior with discipline. This is not a magical or instant process. It requires practice, awareness, and daily commitment. But believe me, it's possible. Let me give you 3 immediate strategies to start cultivating your mental garden. The 3 seeds exercise. Each morning, identify 3 positive thoughts you want to plant that day. They could be, "I am capable of handling the challenges that arise." "Every mistake is a learning opportunity." Or, "I have the strength to maintain my calm." Conscious pruning. Each time you notice a recurring negative thought, ask yourself, "Does this thought bring me closer to the person I want to be?" If the answer is no, visualize pruning that mental branch. Selective watering. At the end of the day, identify 3 moments when you chose a constructive thought over a destructive one. Celebrate these small victories. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote that the quality of our life depends on the quality of our thoughts. And there is no clearer statement to describe this inner war. If you frequently think you're weak, you'll end up acting that way. If you keep repeating to yourself that everything will go wrong, your body will prepare for defeat even before you try. But if, instead, you decide to cultivate the conviction that each stumble is a learning opportunity, your mind will be fertile ground for resilience. Every action is born from a previous idea, and that's why thoughts are more powerful than we think. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, today I want you to do something specific. Go to the comments and write, "Today I decide to plant thoughts that strengthen me." This is not just another call to action. It's a declaration of intention that will begin to reprogram your mind from this moment. Remember, there's no greater freedom than looking inside and discovering that although you don't control everything that happens outside, you can master how you respond to it. The external world will continue to present challenges, but the true victory is won in that invisible battle fought in your mind every day. And that's where true strength is demonstrated, not in defeating others, but in conquering your own. Lesson 2. Identify the voice of darkness. In the mind of every human being, there are voices that try to guide their steps, some full of light that inspire confidence, and others filled with darkness that sow doubts, fears, and resignation. The danger of the latter is that they often disguise themselves as absolute truths, adopting a convincing tone that makes us believe what they say is unquestionable. Let me help you identify the voice of darkness in your own life. This voice has specific characteristics you can learn to recognize. It sounds like absolute certainty. You'll never be able to change. You'll always be this way. No one will understand you. It uses extreme generalizations. Always. Never. Everything. No one. It presents itself as protection. It's better not to try so you don't suffer. Settling is safer. It's based on fear, not reality. Magnifies dangers and minimizes your resources. During my years as a coach, I've heard this voice thousands of times through my clients. Let me share some real examples. The voice of darkness says, "You don't deserve love because you always ruin relationships." The voice of light says, "I've made mistakes, but I can learn and build healthy relationships." The voice of darkness says, "You're too old to change careers." The voice of light says, "I have valuable experience I can transfer to a new field." The voice of darkness says, if you fail, everyone will laugh at you. The voice of light says, failure is part of the growth process, and the people who matter to me will support me. The voice of darkness is especially dangerous because it doesn't appear as a declared enemy. It arrives disguised as logic or common sense. It tells you there's no point in trying because you'll fail, that it's better to settle for less, that others will always be above you. If you don't pay attention, those thoughts begin to guide your behavior, shape your way of speaking, acting, and even the way you look at your own life. Let me teach you a powerful exercise to identify and name your voice of darkness. You'll need paper and pen. Identify the pattern. For the next 3 days, each time you notice a recurring negative thought, write it down exactly as it sounds in your mind. Give it a name. What would you call this voice? The critic? The fearful one? The perfectionist? Analyze its purpose. What does this voice believe it's protecting you from? Example: the critic believes that if it criticizes you first, others won't hurt you as much. Create your response. Design a specific response for when this voice appears. Thanks for your concern, but today I choose to trust my ability. Marcus Aurelius understood that much of our suffering doesn't come from the facts themselves, but from the opinions we accept as true. When you allow doubt and fear to speak louder than your reason, you surrender control of your life to an internal judge who will never be fair. Let me share a transformative case. Maria, a 45-year-old executive, came to me with a specific problem. Every time she had to speak in public, her inner voice told her, everyone will realize you're not as smart as you appear. This voice paralyzed her. Together we identified that this voice was the imposter, who believed it was protecting her from ridicule. But when Maria understood that this voice was just a shadow from the past, she had been severely criticized by a professor in university. She could separate the voice from reality. She created a response. I'm an expert in my field, and I have value to share. In 6 weeks, not only did she overcome her stage fright, but she began to enjoy speaking in public. Darkness feeds on your silence, on your lack of questioning, on your habit of accepting everything that arises in your mind as if it were unquestionable. But the truth is that you have the power to observe those thoughts and decide whether to give them credit or not. Here's an immediate technique for when the voice of darkness appears. Recognize. It's the critic again. Separate. This is a voice, not the truth. Question. What evidence do I have that this is true? Replace. What would my wisest self say in this situation? The simple act of naming what happens inside you is like turning on a lamp in a dark hallway. What seemed terrifying loses its power. Darkness needs anonymity to reign. It needs you not to recognize it, to believe it's part of you. The moment you discover it's a shadow and not your identity, you begin to regain freedom. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, today I want to leave you with a different invitation. Write in the comments the phrase, I've decided to recognize and name my shadows. With that simple gesture, you reinforce your commitment not to let hidden voices manipulate you and begin to transform your interior with light and awareness. Lesson 3. The power of choosing what you think. Many times we believe our mind is an untamable river where ideas flow without control and we can only be swept away by the current. However, this is an illusion that robs us of power. You are not a slave to what comes to your mind because you always have the ability to choose which thoughts to keep and which to let pass. This constant choice is what defines your character, your serenity, and your destiny. Stoicism teaches that true freedom does not consist in controlling the external, but in governing what happens inside you. If you learn to observe each thought as a seed that can germinate into actions, you'll understand that not all deserve your attention. Some contain poison, doubt, anger, resentment, fear. Others, however, are filled with strength, confidence, discipline, gratitude, and patience. You decide which to plant and water. Selecting thoughts is a discipline as demanding as any physical training. At first it feels uncomfortable because the mind has become accustomed to wandering without filter. But with practice, you start to notice the difference between being swept away by the automatic or stopping and making the conscious decision to think differently. Epictetus affirmed that what disturbs us are not the facts, but the way we interpret them. If you interpret a difficulty as an impossible wall, you'll paralyze. But if you see it as a challenge that can polish your strength, then your mind aligns with action. That's the power of choice. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that the quality of our life depends on the quality of our thoughts. And that quality doesn't arise by chance. It comes from conscious selection. Each time you choose to replace a dark thought with a constructive one, you're laying firmer foundations for your character. Seneca taught that the wise man is not dominated by blind passions because he knows that his mind is where everything is decided. When you decide to think in terms of patience instead of impatience, your reaction to others changes. When you choose to see criticism as an opportunity rather than an offense, your energy is preserved. And when you replace the internal voice that says, "You can't," with the one that whispers, "Try one more time," your entire path transforms. Each mental choice opens a different route in your life. Imagine someone who wakes up every morning with the idea that the day will be heavy, that nothing will go well, and that no one understands them. This daily repetition will build an existence tinged with frustration. Now think of someone who upon waking chooses to remind themselves that each day is fertile ground for learning, improving, and growing. Both will live in the same world, but the difference in their paths will be abyssal, because one was swept away by thoughts without filter, and the other decided to choose consciously. The mind is like a garden. If you abandon it, weeds will grow on their own and cover everything. But if you decide to plant, water, and care for it, what will flourish is harmony. No one else can do this work for you, because inner freedom cannot be delegated. The discipline of choosing what you think doesn't eliminate external problems, but completely changes the way you face them. That's the difference between being a prisoner of your mind or its master. The Stoics didn't seek to control the universe. They knew that was impossible. They sought to govern themselves. And that government begins with what you decide to allow inside you. Ask yourself today how many times you repeat limiting ideas and how many times you choose to replace them with thoughts that strengthen you. That's where the root of your destiny lies. Because what you repeatedly think will become what you feel. And what you feel will transform into your actions. And those actions will be the footprint of your life. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, to seal this reminder, write in the comments the phrase, "I choose with discipline the thoughts that build my path." With this, you commit to exercising your inner freedom and proving to yourself that true power has always been in your mental choices. Lesson 4. Master the art of attention. Everything that occupies your mind grows in intensity, because attention is like a magnifying glass that amplifies whatever it's directed toward. If you focus on your fears, they expand until they become giants. If you focus on your strengths, they multiply and sustain your path. What you focus on expands and gains strength. And that's why attention is the most valuable tool you possess. It's not something you need to search for externally. It's always been with you, but we rarely learn to use it with true discipline. The Stoics understood that mastering attention equaled mastering life, because what you decide to observe carefully becomes your reality. Epictetus taught that while we cannot control what happens, we do have the power to choose what we give importance to. This seemingly simple act is what separates living enslaved by what doesn't depend on you from achieving inner freedom by focusing your energy on what's essential. If in your day-to-day you concentrate your attention on past mistakes, you'll end up repeating them in your mind over and over, as if they were chains binding you. But if you direct it toward the lessons learned from those experiences, your perspective changes and the burden becomes momentum. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the quality of our soul depends on the quality of our thoughts, and those thoughts are nourished by what we pay attention to. Every moment is an opportunity to choose. You can look at what's missing or what you already have. You can focus on what hurts you or what strengthens you. Attention is the most costly resource, and paradoxically, the one we waste the most. We spend hours on distractions that don't bring us closer to anything important. We let our minds wander in meaningless worries, and then wonder why we feel empty or frustrated. Seneca warned that life isn't short, but we make it short by wasting it. This reflection gains even more strength when we understand that our attention defines where we invest our time. What seems small becomes enormous when you constantly observe it, and what is valuable can wither if you never look at it carefully. The secret is to learn to redirect your focus again and again toward what truly matters. Concentrating on what's essential dissolves the unnecessary. Just as the light of a lighthouse illuminates the sea and makes the surrounding darkness disappear. When your attention centers on your values, your goals, and your purpose, trivial matters lose relevance. Offenses diminish, criticisms weigh less, problems become manageable, because your gaze isn't trapped in what subtracts, but in what builds. Think of someone going through a difficult time. If they focus only on what they've lost, their life sinks into despair. But if they direct their attention toward what they can still do, toward the steps that are within their power, then they find strength to continue. That's the difference between being a prisoner of circumstances or a captain of your destiny. Attention is like a muscle that needs training. Every time you choose to return to the present, that you decide not to be swept away by thoughts that lead nowhere, you strengthen your ability to maintain control. It's not about denying that distractions or negative emotions exist, but about learning to give them only the attention necessary to understand them, and then redirect your focus toward what truly adds value. Epictetus reminded us that we cannot serve two masters. If you give your attention to fear, you won't have space for confidence. If you give it to resentment, there will be no room for gratitude. Learning to master attention is learning to master yourself, because where you place your inner gaze is where your life grows. Nothing external has as much power over you as your ability to decide where you focus your mind. Today you can choose between feeding what weakens you or nourishing what elevates you. And that choice repeated every day is what determines your destiny. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, to seal this commitment to your own growth, write in the comments the phrase, "I direct my attention toward what strengthens my life." With this, you declare that your inner gaze will be an act of conscious discipline and that each focus will become the foundation of your true freedom. Lesson 5. Transform doubt into certainty. The human mind often debates between clarity and confusion, and in that intermediate ground, doubt appears, a state that paralyzes us and makes us feel small before life. Doubt arises when we leave too much space for uncertainty, when we prefer to imagine possible catastrophes rather than act with decision. The problem isn't that it appears, because it's natural for it to do so, but that we feed it until it becomes a wall that prevents us from moving forward. The Stoics understood that uncertainty is part of existence, but they also knew that in the face of it, we could choose two paths: getting trapped in paralysis or transforming the question into a lesson. Turning doubts into learnings is the beginning of certainty, because each time you extract a lesson from what generates insecurity in you, you're transforming a burden into momentum. Epictetus reminded us that it's not the facts that disturb us, but the interpretation we make of them. If you interpret doubt as a sign of incapability, you'll end up believing you can't. But if you see it as an opportunity to grow, it becomes a teacher that forces you to observe more carefully. Certainty doesn't always come from evidence, because many times the external reality will remain uncertain. What truly provides security is conviction, the inner strength that comes from trusting in your ability to adapt and learn. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul strengthens by accepting the present and acting according to reason, not according to fears. This means that even if you don't know exactly what will happen, you can choose to believe in your ability to respond firmly. Each firm thought creates roots of confidence, and those roots sustain your character in the midst of the storm. Imagine someone who constantly questions whether they're prepared, whether they'll achieve what they desire, whether they'll be able to withstand difficulties. The more time they dedicate to these unanswered questions, the more insecurity they accumulate. But if they decide to respond with actions, acting even while feeling fear, doubt gradually dissolves. Experience becomes proof that they can, and that certainty no longer depends on the external, but on their inner conviction. Seneca stated that the man who fears before his time suffers more than necessary, and that's what doubt does. It multiplies suffering because it anticipates failures that haven't even occurred. When you choose to trust that each obstacle is an opportunity to prove what you're made of, doubt loses strength. Certainty isn't arrogance or naive illusion. It's the conscious decision to place your attention on what you can control. Mental training consists of remembering that each firm thought generates more solid ground. If you choose with discipline to affirm that you're capable of adapting, that you can rise after falling, that you have internal resources to face whatever comes, that conviction becomes reality in your actions. It's not about denying difficulties, but about facing them from a position of confidence. Each time you turn a question into a learning, you strengthen yourself. If you doubt your value, the lesson is to remember that it doesn't depend on external opinion. If you doubt your path, the learning is that there isn't a single route, but the ability to advance step by step. If you doubt your strength, the lesson is that discipline multiplies what you thought was limited. Doubt stops being an enemy when you use it as a signal to deepen your self-knowledge. And when you learn to transform that uncertainty into inner certainty, you discover that security doesn't depend on everything being under control, but on you having decided to trust in your own capacity to respond. Thus, certainty becomes a habit, and the roots of confidence grow until they sustain your entire life. Don't wait for the world to give you guarantees to feel secure, because it may never do so. Start today to cultivate firm thoughts, convictions that remind you who you are and what you're capable of. That's true freedom, not depending on external calm, but on inner firmness. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, to seal this message, write in the comments the phrase, "I decide to transform my doubt into firm confidence." In this way, you strengthen your conviction and remind yourself that security is built with each solid thought you choose to cultivate. Lesson 6. Silence as an ally. There are moments when the world seems to shout so loudly that we forget the most important voice, the one that arises from within. We live surrounded by noise, distractions, and outside opinions competing for our attention, and this uproar ends up covering the clarity we need to make wise decisions. A noisy mind doesn't allow us to hear the truth because it remains occupied repeating fears, reviewing mistakes, and projecting worries. Silence, on the other hand, becomes a refuge where we can see with clarity what was previously covered by chaos. The Stoics knew that keeping quiet isn't an act of passivity, but a deep training of personal mastery. When you choose to stop and be silent, what you're really doing is giving space for calm to organize your interior. Epictetus taught that serenity is achieved not when everything around is peaceful, but when we learn to remain firm in the midst of any storm. And silence is precisely that anchor that allows us to resist. A calm mind is like a tranquil lake that reflects with accuracy what rests on its surface. A noisy mind, on the other hand, is like a turbulent sea that distorts every image and doesn't let you see the bottom. Silence calms internal storms because it cuts the vicious cycle of immediate reaction. In the face of provocation, the normal thing is to respond impulsively. But if you choose a moment of silence, your mind gains clarity and your words become wiser. Marcus Aurelius advised us to constantly remember that we shouldn't rush to react, because many times the best path is revealed only after a moment of quiet. Silence doesn't mean total absence of sound. It means creating an inner space where the voices that previously dominated lose strength. Keeping quiet helps order thoughts in the same way that organizing a room clears the view and lightens the atmosphere. When you stop adding unnecessary noise, your mind places each idea in its place, and what seemed chaotic becomes understandable. Seneca stated that much of our suffering comes from agitating the waters of the mind too much. With silence, you learn to let them rest until the truth shows itself naturally. Clarity appears when the internal noise is silenced, and there's nothing more powerful than discovering that you already possessed within you the answers you were seeking outside. Silence acts as a mirror that reflects without distortion who you really are and where you want to go. It's not about fleeing from the world, but about learning to be with yourself without fear of what emerges. That encounter with your own essence is uncomfortable at first because thoughts you've avoided appear, but little by little you discover that facing them in silence weakens them. The noise feeds them. Quietness dissolves them. The discipline of cultivating silence in a world saturated with stimuli is an act of courage. It means resisting the need to react to every comment, to fill every space with words, to check a screen every minute. It means trusting that what's essential isn't found outside, but in the depth of your own mind. When you make silence an ally, life acquires another dimension. Problems are seen with more perspective, emotions stop dragging you around, and your decisions arise from a more solid place. The practice doesn't require extraordinary conditions. It's enough to stop for a moment, breathe, and keep quiet, even if it's just for a few minutes. This habit, repeated with constancy, strengthens your ability to remain at peace in the midst of any circumstance. Silence is a teacher of patience, a builder of clarity, and a guardian of serenity. Mastering it is mastering yourself, because in that space you discover that you're not your thoughts, but the one who observes them and chooses which to keep. That's true inner freedom. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, to seal this reminder on your own path, write in the comments the phrase, "I embrace silence to find clarity." With this act, you affirm that you choose to make silence a constant ally capable of guiding you toward the calm and lucidity you so desperately need. Lesson 7. Turn fear into courage. Fear is one of the most primitive and powerful emotions of the human being, and although we often see it as an enemy, in reality it's pure energy that can be transformed. That force that sometimes paralyzes can also become the fuel that propels you to take firm steps toward what seems impossible. The problem isn't feeling fear, because no one is exempt from it, but letting it govern your decisions. When you choose to face it head-on, you reduce it to its true measure and discover that most of what terrified you was just a shadow magnified by your mind. The Stoics taught that we shouldn't flee from emotions, but understand and redirect them. Epictetus reminded us that what disturbs us isn't the facts themselves, but the way we interpret them. If you interpret fear as a sign of incapability, it will dominate you. But if you understand it as a reminder that you're facing something important, then it transforms into momentum. Courage doesn't eliminate fear. It accepts it and turns it into an ally. Marcus Aurelius pointed out that we shouldn't expect life to be easy, but to strengthen ourselves to face it. This implies recognizing that fear will never completely disappear, but each step you take with courage will gradually dismantle the dark thoughts that feed it. Imagine you're facing an opportunity you've desired for years. Fear appears disguised as internal voices. You're not good enough. You'll fail. Others are better than you. If you listen to those voices and stop, you lose the opportunity. But if you take a step even with those phrases in your mind, you verify that nothing they said was as big as it seemed. That act of courage generates a mark inside you, proof that you can advance despite fear. Seneca stated that we suffer more in our imagination than in reality. Fear usually inflates an anticipated thoughts of everything that could go wrong, and the more you feed it, the more it grows. However, action shrinks it. When you act, you realize that many of those catastrophes never happen. Facing what you fear returns to you the power you had given to the shadows. Each time you decide to advance with courage, fear loses a bit of its dominion over you. Transforming it isn't a single act, it's a continuous process. Like a muscle, courage strengthens with practice. The more you expose yourself to what you fear, the more capacity you develop to face it. Fear stops being a giant that blocks the path and becomes a signal indicating where the next growth opportunity is. The key is not to wait until you feel completely secure to act, because that security rarely arrives beforehand. Certainty appears afterward as a result of having taken the step. If you want your life to be guided by courage, you must accept that the discomfort of fear is part of the process. Don't reject it, use it. When your heart beats strongly and your mind asks you to retreat, remember that that same energy can propel you forward. Direct it toward action, toward the challenge you face, and you'll verify that fear is just a spark that, properly oriented, ignites the fire of courage. The Stoic understood that mastering his interior was more important than controlling the external. And within that mastery, learning to turn fear into momentum was essential to achieve freedom. It's not about fearing less, but about acting with more conviction. Each brave step weakens the invisible chains that fear builds. And over time, you discover that what seemed insurmountable was simply an illusion. Your life expands to the extent that you expand your courage, because each time you choose to advance, you open new paths and close the door to stagnation. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, today you have the opportunity to take that energy and use it to your advantage, to look in the face what you feared and demonstrate that your will is stronger than any shadow. To affirm this commitment to yourself, write in the comments the phrase, "I turn my fear into action force." This gesture will mark your decision to no longer retreat before doubts and to walk with courage toward everything that truly matters. Lesson 8. Break the cycle of negativity. There are times when the mind becomes fertile ground for darkness, where a negative thought doesn't come alone, but drags another and then another, forming a heavy chain that steals energy and distorts reality. If this cycle isn't interrupted, it becomes a downward spiral that makes the small seem immense, the temporary feel eternal, and the manageable seem impossible. The Stoics understood that the mind has a tendency to repeat what it feeds, which is why they insisted on the importance of watching thoughts with the same attention a guard watches the gates of a city. A dark thought attracts another similar one, because the mind seeks coherence and ends up confirming what it already thinks. If your focus is on what's missing, everything you see will reinforce that lack. If you center it on what hurts you, every external gesture will seem like an attack. But in the same way, if you choose to look with gratitude, the mind will find reasons to be thankful. Interrupting this cycle is an act of strength because it doesn't happen automatically. It requires discipline to stop in the middle of the mental storm and say, "Enough." Epictetus remembered that no one can dominate your mind if you don't give them permission. And this teaching comes to life when you decide to cut off the thought that tries to drag you. It's not about denying reality, but preventing negativity from becoming a habit. Creating new mental habits is cutting the chains that tie you to the same mistakes. Marcus Aurelius affirmed that the quality of your life depends on the quality of what you think daily. If every day you train your mind to look with distrust, resentment, or fear, you'll be sowing barren ground. But if you accustom it to stop, question, and redirect, then you'll be watering seeds that will flourish in calmness, patience, and strength. This process isn't instantaneous. It requires repetition, but each time you choose to break the cycle, your mind becomes more skilled at recognizing the patterns that once trapped you. Imagine waking up one day with a dark thought. Everything goes wrong for me. If you don't interrupt it, your mind will recall past mistakes, add current problems, and project future failures. In a few hours, your mood will be sunk without anything external having changed. But if you choose to stop that thought and replace it with a constructive one, like, "I've overcome difficulties before and I can do it again," you'll have broken the chain and created a new direction. This change seems small, but accumulated day after day, it transforms your entire life. Seneca warned that most of our misfortunes don't come from reality, but from the way we let our thoughts chain together without control. Negativity is like an underground current, invisible at first, but capable of dragging you with force if you don't decide to get out of it. The most powerful weapon against this cycle is gratitude. Substituting negativity for gratitude disarms pessimism because both emotions cannot coexist. When you choose to be thankful, even for something minimal, you're changing the direction of your attention and weakening the power of darkness. It could be your health, a friendship, an opportunity, or simply the fact of being alive one more day. By focusing on that, the weight of the negative lightens, and the mind finds a different balance. The Stoics didn't seek to eliminate all unpleasant emotions because they knew they're part of life, but they did train the mind not to get trapped in them. The real power is in recognizing that you always have the option to break the cycle. Each time you do it, you get a little closer to inner freedom. The next time you notice your mind repeating in dark loops, remember you don't have to follow that path. You can stop, question, and choose another direction. That's the sign that you govern yourself, not the other way around. And when you make this a daily practice, you discover that pessimism loses ground and serenity begins to expand. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, to seal this commitment to yourself, write in the comments the phrase, "Today I cut the chain of negativity with gratitude." This reminder will mark your decision to transform your focus and use your mind as a tool of construction instead of letting it be an echo of darkness. Lesson 9. Affirm your identity with clarity. Often, life attempts to mold us according to others' expectations, imposing labels that don't always reflect who we really are. Amid criticisms, comparisons, and outside opinions, the mind risks becoming confused and losing its direction. That's why affirming your identity with clarity becomes a fundamental act of strength. Knowing who you are protects your mind from distortions, because when internal clarity is firm, no outside voice has the power to define you. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the tranquility of the soul depends on living according to one's own nature. And this teaching reminds us that the essential isn't pleasing everyone, but recognizing your own essence and walking in coherence with it. Insecurity feeds on doubts, but those doubts lose strength when you have certainty about what you represent. Internal security weakens the voice of doubt because you no longer need each person to confirm your value. Epictetus pointed out that the free man is the one who doesn't depend on external approval to live in peace. And that's where the importance of building a solid identity lies. When your mind knows what it believes in, what it relies on, and where it's going, criticisms become passing noise that doesn't penetrate deeply. Holding on to your purpose blocks dark thoughts, because purpose is like a lighthouse in the middle of a storm. If you don't know why you're walking, any stumble seems like a reason to give up. But if your goal is clear, each obstacle transforms into part of the path. Seneca warned that there's no favorable wind for whoever doesn't know which port they're heading to. And that phrase is an invitation to define the direction of your life. When you choose with clarity, your steps gain firmness, and the mind stops wandering in doubts that wear you down. A clear identity guides your mental choices because it becomes a filter for everything that happens. If you know your value doesn't depend on comparisons, you won't fall into the trap of measuring your life against others' yardsticks. If you know your purpose is to grow and serve, you won't waste time on distractions that only take you away from that goal. The mind needs a center, and that center is the awareness of who you are and what you represent. Imagine someone who has no clarity about themselves. Every negative comment wounds them deeply. Every outside opinion moves them from side to side. Every unexpected situation makes them wobble. They live like a leaf in the wind, at the mercy of what happens outside. Now imagine someone who has signed their identity with conviction. They know what their values are, what they want to contribute, and what they're not willing to accept. That person isn't immune to pain or stumbles, but every blow finds a wall of solidity that reminds them their essence remains intact. That's the difference between living confused or living in coherence. Stoic training consists of remembering again and again that the external doesn't define who you are. Your essence doesn't change because of a criticism, nor does it collapse because someone doubts you. What truly strengthens your mind is the discipline of reaffirming your identity every day, of reminding yourself that your value doesn't depend on life's whims. Clarity doesn't mean rigidity. It means you have a firm core around which you can adapt without losing yourself. When difficulty arises, your identity acts as a guide for deciding how to react. When the temptation to abandon comes, your purpose becomes the force that sustains you. And when doubt appears disguised as dark thoughts, your inner security weakens it because there's no space for beliefs that contradict what you know you are. Affirm your identity with clarity, and you'll discover that life stops feeling like an endless maze and begins to be lived as a conscious path. You don't need everything to be easy or for everyone to agree. You need the certainty that you're walking in coherence with what your interior dictates. That conviction is the greatest protection against the world's noise and the best compass for every decision. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, to seal this reminder, write in the comments the phrase, "My clear identity strengthens my path." With this, you declare that you choose to live from your essence, and that no outside voice will be stronger than the certainty you've built within you. Lesson 10. The Power of Inner Speech. Every person carries within a voice that never goes silent, a constant murmur that accompanies every decision, every emotion, and every step. This inner voice has immense power because what you say to yourself defines how you perceive the world and, consequently, how you act. The power of inner speech is so great that it can become the foundation of your strength or the root of your defeat. If your internal dialogue is loaded with criticism, fear, and distrust, you'll end up building a reality dominated by those emotions. But if you consciously choose to transform those words into positive affirmations, Your mind will become an ally that sustains you rather than sinking you. Self-criticism can be useful when it clearly points out what we need to improve, but it becomes destructive when it turns into a constant whip that repeats mistakes, exaggerates flaws, and extinguishes any hint of confidence. Epictetus taught that it's not things that harm us, but the opinions we have about them. And few opinions are as determining as the ones we have about ourselves. Every word you repeat in your mind becomes an order that your body and emotions obey. If you tell yourself repeatedly that you're not capable, your energy weakens before you even try. If you repeat that you're not worthy of love or success, your behavior will seek to confirm that belief. The mind obeys what it hears repeatedly, which is why you must be vigilant about the type of messages you allow to grow within you. Marcus Aurelius remembered that the quality of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts, and in that realm, the most influential thought is the one born from your inner speech. Transforming your internal dialogue into positive affirmation strengthens you because what you choose to repeat to yourself every day becomes the foundation of your character. It's not about deceiving yourself with empty phrases, but about replacing the poison of self-criticism with the clarity of affirmations that reflect your real value. Telling yourself, "I can't block your path," while saying, "I'll try with discipline," opens the possibility of growth. Seneca pointed out that man suffers more in the imagination than in reality, and much of that imaginary suffering comes from a toxic internal discourse that we don't question. The mind repeats what it hears, just as an echo reproduces a voice. If you decide to nourish it with phrases of confidence, reminders of your purpose, and words that reflect your strength, that echo will become a shield against doubt. If, instead, you feed it with insults against yourself, you'll end up eroding your own foundation. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. One constantly tells themselves they're incapable, that they'll fail, that they don't have what's needed. The other, although also feeling fear, reminds themselves that they've overcome tests before, that they have internal resources, that they can learn. Both live the same situation, but their realities will be completely different because the inner voice they hear day after day has shaped their actions and emotions. You can't always control what others say, but you can choose what to say to yourself. That's the most powerful tool you possess. Each repetition is like a chisel blow that sculpts your character. If you repeat phrases that strengthen you, your identity will become solid. If you repeat phrases that destroy you, your confidence will crack. The discipline consists of training your inner speech to be a lighthouse, not a burden. This training requires constancy because the mind tends to return to what's familiar, even if what's familiar is harmful. But with practice, you can change the tone of your internal voice until it becomes your most loyal ally. Affirm your value clearly. Remember your achievements. Repeat your capacity to learn, and little by little, your mind will obey these new orders until they become part of your essence. The power of inner speech doesn't reside in eliminating external problems, but in giving you the firmness to face them with serenity. When your internal voice becomes affirmation, your entire life changes direction. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, for this reflection to become action, write in the comments the phrase, "I decide to nourish my mind with words that strengthen me." This way, you seal your commitment to transform your internal dialogue into the firmest source of confidence and clarity on your path. Lesson 11. Train your mind like a muscle. Just as the body needs constant exercise to stay strong, the mind also requires discipline to reach its maximum potential. Many believe that thoughts come and go without us being able to do anything, but in reality, the mind can be trained like a muscle. Mental discipline requires constancy because it's not enough to try it once. Just as you don't build physical strength with a single workout, you don't forge inner strength with an isolated effort. Real change comes from daily practice, from repetition that gradually shapes your character. Practicing daily control strengthens character because every moment you choose not to be swept away by negative emotions becomes an internal victory. Epictetus remembered that we cannot control what happens outside, but we can decide how we react. That decision, repeated many times, forges a mind that doesn't bend at the first provocation. Marcus Aurelius insisted that self-mastery is the greatest conquest, and to achieve it, you need to train your mind with the same seriousness with which a soldier trains their body for battle. Repetition builds inner strength because the mind, like muscles, learns through habit. If you repeat defeatist thoughts every day, your mind weakens and gets accustomed to giving up. But if you consistently repeat affirmations of discipline, serenity, and confidence, your interior strengthens until those qualities become a natural part of you. Seneca said that luck favors prepared minds, and that preparation doesn't happen in comfort, but in the constant effort of watching your thoughts and correcting them when they stray. A trained mind doesn't surrender to dark thoughts because it has practiced enough to recognize them and not yield to their influence. Imagine you're lifting weights. Each repetition hurts. Each set demands effort, but over time your body responds and becomes stronger. The mind works the same way. Each time you face a negative thought and decide not to let it govern you, it's like a repetition that strengthens your inner resistance. At first it's hard because the natural tendency is to be swept away. But with practice you discover that mental strength grows, and what once knocked you down now barely shakes you. Mental training consists of simple but powerful exercises: stopping before reacting, breathing when anger tries to dominate you, choosing gratitude instead of complaint, keeping your focus on what's essential instead of dispersing in the trivial. None of these acts is spectacular by itself, but repeated day after day, they build a firm mind. Just as muscles fatigue and recover, the mind also strengthens through constancy. Epictetus taught that what we practice frequently becomes part of us, and that's the key. Practicing discipline until it becomes an automatic habit. A mind that has trained patience doesn't lose calm at the first provocation. A mind that has trained gratitude doesn't get caught by complaint. A mind that has trained clarity doesn't give up in the face of confusion. Each of these habits is the result of practice, not chance. The most common mistake is waiting for a crisis to want to react with strength. Just as an athlete doesn't wait for competition to start training, you also can't wait for difficult moments to form your character. You must do it every day, in the everyday, in the small, so that when the real test comes, your mind is ready. Training your mind is committing to yourself, to your growth, and to your freedom. It's not easy or quick, but the result is invaluable. A life guided by serenity and the conviction that nothing external can knock you down if your interior is solid. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, I invite you to write in the comments, "Disciplining my mind is the key to my strength." With this, you seal your decision to train your interior every day, reminding yourself that conscious repetition is the path to an unbreakable character. Lesson 12. Conquer your inner freedom. Throughout history, countless people have sought freedom in external territories, changing governments, tearing down walls, fleeing from visible chains. However, the Stoics understood a deeper truth. The greatest conquest isn't outside, it's within you. Mastering your mind is conquering your greatest territory, because until you manage to govern your thoughts and emotions, you'll remain a slave, even if you live in the most open place. True freedom doesn't depend on external circumstances, because even those who were imprisoned in body could maintain an unbreakable spirit thanks to the discipline of their mind. Epictetus, who was born a slave, affirmed that no one could rob him of the freedom to decide how to interpret what happened. His example shows that the hardest chain is the one we place on our own mind by surrendering to fear, resentment, or anger. Mental peace is the fruit of victory over darkness, not the absence of difficulties. The world will always bring challenges, injustices, and situations beyond our control. But when you decide to face those trials with serenity, you discover there's an invulnerable place within you. Marcus Aurelius remembered that our soul is disturbed only if we give it permission, and that reminder is a powerful weapon. Nothing external has power over you if your interior remains firm. When you govern your interior, nothing outside can subdue you. That's the conquest that matters most, because the world may change 1 in 1,000 times. But if you've learned to remain master of your mind, you'll always have a refuge of peace. Imagine for a moment someone who completely depends on what others think of them. Every criticism wounds them. Every rejection knocks them down. Every outside look determines their mood. They live chained to external judgments because they haven't conquered their inner freedom. Now imagine someone who, even receiving the same criticisms, remembers that their value doesn't depend on outside opinion. That person can listen, evaluate, and let go without anything stealing their balance. The difference isn't in the environment, but in inner governance. Seneca said no one is free if they're a slave to their passions. And how right he was. As long as anger dominates you, you're not free. As long as envy consumes you, you're not free. As long as fear decides for you, you're not free. Conquering inner freedom requires courage, because it means looking yourself in the face, recognizing that internal chains still trap you, and working to break them. It's not enough to desire peace. You must train it with discipline. Each time you choose not to react with violence, each time you decide to be thankful instead of complaining, each time you replace a dark thought with a constructive one, you're gaining ground in that conquest. True strength isn't measured by how many you've defeated outside, but by how many times you've overcome within yourself what tried to drag you. Self-mastery is the highest form of freedom because it gives you the power to choose your response instead of being dragged by impulses. The Stoics understood that life would never be a path without tests, but they also knew there's no wall that can enclose a trained mind. Conquering your inner freedom means deciding that your state of mind won't depend on life's whims. It means recognizing that you can't control the wind, but you can adjust the sails. It means accepting that there will be storms, but your inner ship will know how to stay afloat if your rudder is firm. By achieving it, you discover that no person or circumstance can subdue you because you've found within you an untouchable space of calm and clarity. That's the greatest victory a human being can achieve. If you're on the Vita Stoica channel, to engrave this truth on your path, write in the comments the phrase, "I've decided to govern my interior to live in freedom." With this commitment, you declare that your peace won't depend on what happens outside but on the strength you build within you. If you've made it this far, write in the comments, "I've decided to close the door to my shadows and open the path to my inner strength." I invite you to subscribe to Vita Stoica, activate notifications, and comment so YouTube recognizes these videos are useful for people like you. This motivates us to continue creating similar content in the future. I suggest reviewing the 2 latest videos we recommend. I sincerely appreciate your time and support. See you in our next adventure.